You gotta give it up to them Italians, man. They know how to prog. Ursa by Novembre. So Novembre is an Italian melodic death metal band who really made a name for themselves back in the mid-90s, when a lot of those European death metal bands were coming out, such as Opeth and Catatonia. And you can really feel their influences when you're listening to these songs. Now admittedly, this is the first album that I've heard from Novembre, but it definitely sounds like the Candlelight era from Opeth, you know, that Orchard, My Arms, Your Hearse, and Morning Rise. In fact, many of these songs could fit perfectly on any of these three albums from Opeth, but it's much more of a polished sound, it's much more of a mature sound than that. And these influences kind of go even deeper than the Opeth and Catatonia with the influences of those bands as well. There's definitely feel of, say, a Renaissance or a Goblin or any of those early 70s deep metal bands, or almost like those acid rock, heavy metal or heavy rock bands from the 70s. Definitely the influences are seen on here. So there's kind of a convergence of all those influences going on. And the overall sound is definitely a dark light kind of a feel, like almost a half light, where the songs might be dark, but there's a light approach to the music on that. And I kind of like that. Taking some of those influences, The Rose, which is one of my favorite songs on this album, reminds me very much of Goblin, especially that end riff. Not to mention all those harmonizations that were being used, not only within the vocals, but also within the guitars, and that's what I really appreciated. Agathy, which is another one of my favorite songs off this album, really reminds me of Night of the Silent Water from Opeth's album Morning Rise. It also comes right off the heels of Analyst, and so I love when the song kind of bleeds right into another one, using that inertia from the one song and really pushing it through into the next. And I really like how these guys are really able to balance that melodic harmonizations of the vocals and the guitars with that brutality of the growls and sometimes very brutal guitars. It never really gets to that point of like a blasting beats of the guitar, but the atmosphere is still very heavy and very dark, which is blended very well with those growls. Now this is always a very hard balancing act when you're trying to balance that melodic aspect with the death metal technique. And I feel like they accomplish this a lot better than a lot of bands that have tried this in the past. When they have the clean vocals, it's always harmonized very, very well, especially with the Song of Easter. It really sets the tone of that very melodic approach so that when we get to the growls and when we get to the more brutal parts of that, it feels much more brutal than it would have if we just got shoved right into the brutality of it. So getting through some of those nitty-gritty parts of the guitar, I really like how they crafted a lot of these guitar works. As I said before, there's no real blasting beats or those kind of jump on the couch and air guitar moments that a lot of those other bands have. But where they make up for it, they make up for it in the atmosphere and within the harmonizations and the melodies that are found within this. That's where the melodic part comes in. It's not always the chugging guitar that's leading the song through, or the plethora of notes having that cascade of noodling. It's much more of an atmospheric approach, and I really applaud these guys for doing that. And to paint a perfect picture of this, I love how the ending track of Ursa comes through. It's some beautiful playing right there. We have those wonderful vocal harmonizations accompanied by the rhythm guitar and lead guitar. It's just a really nice treat to have. And I've already touched upon the growls a little bit, but I do want to point out one thing, and that the growls are very clean on this album. And I don't know if it's just because I've been exposed to this musical technique now for over 10 years and I'm starting to habituate myself to the lyrics, but I can actually hear the lyrics that are going through, so I don't need to follow along in the note sleeves of this album. I can actually just listen to the lyrics being growled at. Overall, I feel like this album is much more folky in feel and atmosphere than a lot of these bands have tried to do. It's hard to describe, but it almost feels like a woodsy or an oaky taste throughout the album. even though it's labeled as melodic death metal, I would feel that the melodic part takes more emphasis here than the death metal part. I mean, overall, I had a great time with this album. I would have to say, stream this album with headphones. If you're in that crave for that early Opeth sound, that Candlelight Trilogy style, that harken back to the early ones before Opeth got really into the prog stuff, then this is definitely something to check out. Heck, I'd even say if you're into melodic death metal, or if you're into death metal or just melodic type of music, give these guys a try. They might be up your alley. And that's about it. So what did you guys think of Ursa by Novembre? Did you love it? Did you hate it? If you haven't listened to it, I would recommend it. I'd say give it a spin. It might be up your alley. Whatever it was, let me know by commenting below. And thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.